Hello everyone, I'm Shweta and I'll be your presenter for the day. I hope all of you can hear my voice and I'm just going to share my screen. Is my voice audible to everyone? All right, so I'm just sharing my screen. So I'll just quickly walk you through the topics what we have covered in our last session, and the remaining part we will cover today. And we have one more session which is scheduled for next Saturday. So we will try to cover all the topics in these three sessions. I've just shared the screen for the topics which we covered last Saturday. So just to walk you through and just to make a revision of what we covered till now. So we started with the research methods versus the methodology, the difference between the two. Then we discussed about the research strategies, research design. So there were two basic research design, two broad research designs, which we discussed last Saturday, which is exploratory research design and conclusive research design. Then we discussed about research paradigm, and we have two paradigms, which is positivism and interpretivism. Then we talked about the research approaches, which is data collection approach. In that we have quantitative research approach, qualitative research approach, and mixed research approach. Whereas the other point which we consider here is the reasoning approaches or the data analysis approaches, wherein we have inductive approach, deductive approach, and mixed approach. So this is what we discussed in our first session. If any one of you is having any doubts, or maybe if you have worked upon these topics in last 1 week and you have some doubts regarding this, you can ask me. Then we will start with the next part. If you have any doubts related to this, you can ask me. If no, we can move to our today's topic. Nanta, you can mail to us regarding the slides. We can email all the PPTs to you. You can email us. We will mail you the PPT, as well as we have the recorded session of our last Saturday. That also we can email to you. Okay, all of those who have joined today and was not there in our last week's session can email to us, and we can send you the PPTs as well as the recording of the last session. You can go through there. All right. So now I'm starting with the today's session. Just okay. So is this screen visible to all of you? All right. So today we are going to cover regarding how to calculate sample size, what are the different sampling techniques, what are the types of questionnaires available, which type of scale you have to use in your questions while developing the questionnaire. Then how to do pilot testing and how you can check the reliability and validity of your questionnaire. Now, as I said, all these things in my last session also, that the topics which I am covering are basic, and I think all of you must be knowing the definitions, like what is sample size, what is questionnaire, what is research designs. All the definitions you might be aware about that, but how you have to use that in your research methodology chapter, or whenever you are developing a research methodology chapter, how you have to incorporate all these things in that chapter. That is what the agenda of these of planning this webinar. So if you have like in last session, many of you have asked me that how you have to calculate sample size for your own researches, what is the formula, what is the method, how much sample size you have to consider for your research. So that is what I'm going to discuss today. So if you have your own researches, you have finalized your topic, your objective, and you are stuck up at a stage wherein you have to calculate a sample size for your research. So you can write that in the chat box. You can mention the details, and we will calculate the sample size for you, or maybe it is possible for me to answer right now. So I will do that. So you can discuss about your own researches if you want to do. Now I'm starting with the first definition, which is very simple, but people, all the scholars often get confused between the terms, because usually when I talk to them, so they are confused like which is to be considered as a population and what is to be considered as a sample. So it's a basic thing. Like you can consider your population as the total number of set of elements, like total people which are involved, which can be a part of your research, but obviously you cannot have all the let's say respondents in your research. So the total set of people who can be a part of your research is your population, and then you have to select a few from them, which is your sample. So let's say I have written one example here, like the total number of pet stores in Bangalore is a population. Whereas if I wanted to see that how many of pet stores, like out of total, how many of pet stores are selling a particular type of a product, is my sample. Okay, so a smaller part from a population is called as a sample. Now, when we are working on our research, so we should know both. We should know that what is the population of our research study, because once we know the population, then only we can find out a sample. So it is important that you should know who your population is, how much your population is, and then only you can define your sample. So I will explain this through an example, which we are continuing from our last webinar. So I will continue with that example. Okay, now whenever you are calculating your sample size, you need to consider three things. Even if you are calculating sample size using some online calculator. So again, you need these three things with you. One is the population size, as I told that you have a sample size, you should know what is the total number of population you have in your research. Then second is the confidence level. Now, this confidence level is a probability value, which you can say that your sample, because obviously you're not taking 100% of the population, you're just taking a sample from it. So it is your confidence level that the sample which you are taking is uh, like how much accurate that sample is. So you have to set your confidence level, and in I think in most of the researches, most of the academic researches, the confidence level which we are setting is 95%, which means that we are 95% sure that the sample which we are taking is going to reflect an accurate result, and that accuracy is 95%. So in simple terms, if I have to explain, so I'm setting that 95% accurate results will be there from this sample size. So you have to maintain this. You can change this confidence level also as per your research, but 95% is the standard which we are taking. Then the third point which you need to consider while calculating the sample size is the margin of error. Now, obviously, if I go by the logic, if I'm doing a research, so I want that my confidence level should be more and my margin of error should be less, right? If I'm, let's say if I'm taking 200 as my sample size from a population of 1 lakh people, for an example. So I want that those 200 people which I am picking are going to reflect like 95% or 100% accuracy in my results. And being a scholar, being a researcher, I do not want that they will give me any kind of errors, or my results are not okay. So I will consider that my confidence level should be higher and my margin of error should be lower. Okay, so generally when we are assuming the values, we are setting the numbers for these two things, for confidence level and for margin of error. So we are considering 95% confidence level and 5% as margin of error. Now, this is a very common formula which is being used in most of the researches to calculate the sample size. So I have given a formula here. If you want to note down, you can note down. Otherwise, we will share this PPT with you. So what you have to do here is you just need to put the values in this formula. I will tell you the values, like P is for Z, I am giving you the values. Other values you just need to put in this formula and you will get the sample size. But one important value here is the population size. So you need to calculate population size, and I think that is one thing which consumes your time, because you know which is your population and what can be your respondents. So that is one thing which you need to do on your own, that you need to calculate your population size, and the rest of the details you can just put in this formula and you will get the sample size. These are the Z-scores value. If you see in this formula, it's Z-score value is required. So I have just given Z-score value for all the confidence level, which is so generally in most of the cases, as I said, 95% is the confidence level for almost all the researchers, but you can also take 80%, 85%, 80%, depending upon how much sample size you wish to have. So that you can set accordingly. Now, this is a key tip. Like if these are the four things basically which you need to consider while calculating your sample size. Now, if the value increased, like if your population is increasing, let's say you are taking 10 million 10 million population size, so obviously your accuracy is going to decrease. Accuracy of getting the result is going to be decreased. Similarly, if your sample size is increasing, you are taking data from more number of people, so obviously your accuracy of the result is going to increase. Again, same goes with the accuracy level, but it is not same for margin of error. If you are taking let's say you are collecting 200 data from 200 people, and you are saying that 15% is the margin of error. Like 15% are the chances that your results are going to deviate from the actual results. So more the number of margin of error, the more like the accuracy of your result is going to decrease. Now, if your population size is decreased, then your accuracy is going to increase. So it's a vice versa. You can refer this table when you are going to finalize your sample size. So it's again like a key tip which you can follow while you're calculating your sample size. But again, one thing which is an additional tip, like if you are going to increase your sample size just to get more accuracy in the data, so you also need to note down that would you be able to collect data from so many respondents? Like let's say you are considering sample size of 500 people. So are you actually able to collect data from 500 people or not? If you are able to do so, then there is no problem. You can go for 500 sample size as well. But if you think that no, I can collect data from only 100 or 200 people, and I would not be able to get data from 500 people, so don't go for a bigger sample size. Just go for 100 or 200. It will also give you an accurate result. So this you need to decide as per your research area, what is your target population, and accordingly you can have your sample size. So I received a lot of questions last week regarding this sample size. I want all of you to check this. And if you have any kind of doubts regarding your sample size, what should be the sample size for your own research, you can ask me in the chat box. I'm now active on chat box. You can ask me questions related to this. I can show you one, like there are so many online calculators are also available, sample size calculators. So even you can use that, but I think that becomes a little difficult once you have to defend that which formula you have used for calculating the sample size. But if you want to cross verify, you can always do using a online sample size calculator. But do from a authentic website like SurveyMonkey, like all many websites are there which are providing this sample size calculator. But just check from 2 or 3 websites that the calculator is correct or not, if you don't want to use this formula. But if you have to show in your thesis that how you have calculated the sample size, what is the population, and you need to justify that how you arrived at this sample size, then you can use this formula. I think this is applicable for all the researches wherein a sample size calculation is required. But again, this will go for a quantitative research, because generally when we are doing a qualitative research, we do not prefer a bigger number of sample size, let's say 100. We do not target for 100 people in qualitative research. So I think this formula will go better when you are doing a quantitative research. Yes, this is what I exactly wanted to explain. Like this is being asked by one of the scholar in the chat box, that for researching leadership, like if your topic is such that you have to conduct an interview of, let's say, some top leaders, so you cannot have 100 interviews. It's not possible. So you can select any random number. The first like method of selecting a sample size would be a random one, or maybe more convenient one. Let's say you are able to collect data from only 10 top leaders or 15 top leaders, so that can be your sample size, because uh, I think there is no minimum or maximum limit for a qualitative research sample size. 15 to 25 is a general sample size which is being followed in most of the researches, but there is no I think rule that okay, you have to have more than 15 or less than 25. But if you see the general scenario, what all the research scholars are doing, so 15 to 25 is enough. Again, it depends that what type of questions you have, how much is the length of your questionnaire. If your questionnaire is very lengthy and it's going to consume around half an hour or 1 hour, I think then it's little difficult to collect data from so many people. So you can have 10 or 15 also. If you think that the leaders are, in your case, leaders are available, they are accessible, and you can collect data from even 20 or 25 people, so that also you can do. So depending upon how much data you would be able to get from the leaders, or how many leaders you can target, you can select your sample size. And I think for qualitative research, you do not have to justify also that why you taken only 15, why you taken only 20. So because only 15 leaders are accessible to you, that is why you collected. So for qualitative research, this is a added advantage that you don't have to justify your sample size. If we are taking employees in general, how do we know the population or sample size? Yeah, this is a good question. If you are taking employees, so you must be targeting any specific location. Let's say if in India, pan India you are taking, or you are taking any particular state, then you can classify that if you are taking all IT employees, or any specific department employees, so you can categorize that. If not, then you can take a population, like from Google you can find out that what are the number of people which are employed. That's a very general one, but approximately you will get the idea. And generally in cases wherein people are doing researches based on employees, so around 200 to 250 could be your sample size. 200 to 250 is okay. But again, as I said, it depends that how much employees are accessible to you. That is also a question which you need to consider. Okay, there's a question from Akshita. I have to research on hotels and particularly on one department, that is housekeeping in Delhi. Nor then shall I calculate the sample size? So, what type of questionnaire you are planning to develop in this case? Since it's related to one department, I need to know your objectives. Like, are you planning to have a quantitative questionnaire or a qualitative questionnaire? Which is again dependent, like what sort of objectives you have for your research. Okay, you are planning to research on employees, and it would be a quantitative research. So again, you can take around 200 people, but you have mentioned that you want to target only one department, that is housekeeping. So we need to see that how many employees or people are involved in housekeeping section of the hotel industry, and how many hotels you want to target. So basis on that, you need to calculate your population. Here you have to justify. Let's say you are, for an example, you are considering 10 people, 10 staff members in housekeeping department, and you are taking 5 hotels of Delhi. Maybe you can categorize as 3-star hotel, 4-star hotel, or 5-star hotels. So you can categorize them, or you can just simply write that you are taking 5 hotels or 10 hotels of Delhi, and then you can have your sample size. So it's not necessary that you have to use that formula to calculate your sample size in your case, Akshita. You can do a manual calculation and you can just justify that how you arrived at that number. That is what is required. But this is for all of you who are doing a quantitative research. I recommend you to have your sample size more than 100. Do not go for sample size which is less than 100, because later on, once you start doing the data analysis, if your data size, your sample size is less than 100, SPSS will not give you a good result. So to get good result, your sample size should always be more than 100. 100 is also fine, but if you are taking 200, 250, that is more better. Okay, the next after Akshita, okay, this is a phone number. I do not get the name. We will share the recording and the PPT. Whoever is looking for the recording and the PPT of this webinar, they can get it. They can email to us and we will mail them. Okay, so there's a question from Ratandeep. What should be sample size if we have to detect a particular gene in infection causing bacteria in a particular area of community? This is little different one, Ratandeep. This is related to a medical domain. So again, you need to show your research objectives, what exactly you wanted to check, and how like what exactly you are going to do from that sample size. I basically wanted to know about that first. Okay, so I plan for 25 liters interview that is well aligned with what you suggested. I started interviewing, generally takes about 1.5 to 2 hours. Okay. So, all right. So when you are taking an interview and it is going to take around 1.5 or 2 hours, so it is better you record the audio if you are taking interview. So you need to record the audio. If you are recording, the further process says that you need to write all those answers also, because how you would be able to do the analysis using the audio part, you cannot do that. So to do further analysis, you need all the answers, all the interviews in a written format. So if you are making notes, I think then, because it's a manual thing, there are chances that you skip some important points. So I would suggest you to record the audio, record the complete interview, and after recording, you can make the transcripts of that, which is you can write all the answers as per your question. Because I think generally when we are taking interview, we usually do not go question by question, so the conversation turns in a different way. So it's better you record and then you write, so that it becomes easy for you to do the analysis at a later stage. Prashant, I'm going to cover this in my next session. The question which you asked is regarding the p-value and whether if a p-value is less, so how you have to reject the null hypothesis. This topic I'm going to cover in my next webinar, next session of this webinar series, which is on next Saturday. So this will be covered under a topic hypothesis testing. Once you are developed with the hypothesis and you're doing the analysis, so how you have to reject or accept the hypothesis. So I'm going to cover this in my next session. when we are talking about sample size or we are talking about the pilot testing, we do not consider about p-value. Okay. There's a question from Raja Abdul. How can I measure transformational leadership in higher education? Uh, I need to see the objectives. I need to see that which point of view are you are taking. You're taking from professor's point of view. If you're taking from professor's point of view, so you can go for qualitative research. You can build a qualitative questionnaire, and you can have the response from them. Okay. So Ratandeep is saying, my objective is to find the role of resistance causing gene in a particular area. Okay. So which area you are taking? What let's say any particular area which you are taking, you can have the population size from that particular area, whatever state or whatever district, whichever area you are referring to here, you can have a total population of that area, and then you can calculate your sample size accordingly. Okay. Mr. Raja Abdul is saying, please discuss role of mediator also. So do you want me to explain about mediator while selecting the variables, or for your topic you're asking? I'm not very clear with the question. I would suggest you to write your complete query in one message so that I can read it. Nanta, your question is how to measure successfulness of digital marketing for SMEs. I think again two aspects can be done. Maybe you are taking data from the SMEs, or you are taking data from normal people or an employee, and you want to have the a view on that. So if you're taking, I think SMEs, I would suggest you to go for a qualitative research, because you can have a exploratory kind of a response from them. And if you're taking data, if you're planning to collect data from normal people or from employees, then you can go for quantitative. How this topic was actually covered in my last week session, wherein you have to decide that what kind of a research you have to adopt, like whether it's a quantitative or a qualitative. Because if you have selected that, then only you come to this sample size part, right? So first step is to find out whether your research is going to have a quantitative one or a qualitative one or a mixed one. So to select that, to finalize on the quantitative or qualitative or mixed, you should know your topic and your objectives well. So even if I have to tell you that, okay, this is, you should go for quantitative or you should go for qualitative, I should have a basic research objective with me, so that I can evaluate that, okay, if you want to do such kind of a research, you can go for this type of questionnaire. So that is required even for me also to suggest. So what I am suggesting you right now is I am assuming certain things in my mind that, okay, if you're going to collect data from SMEs, you must be asking these questions. This must be your objective. So I am assuming certain things. Then I'm telling you that, okay, you can go for a qualitative questionnaire or a quantitative questionnaire. But I think you have already finalized your objectives. So for me to tell you better, or for me to tell you which is the best methodology for your research, I actually wanted the research objectives as well, so that I can go through them and I can let you know about that. Okay, Tanvi, about selecting a mediator and moderator variable, I have already covered this in my one of my last webinar, which was on theoretical framework and conceptual framework. And I think that is also uploaded on YouTube. So you can go through that. And still, if you have any doubts regarding how to select variables, then you can tell me. If your sample size is less, will that affect the confidence interval? I think if you're selecting a very, you're saying your sample size is less. No, 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 no. Sample size will not affect your confidence level. If your sample size is less and you are sure that the data which you are collecting from them is accurate, I think that will not reflect your confidence level. The points which can justify your sample size is one, the population. Population is very important to select your sample size. Second thing is the availability and the accessibility. That if, let's say, if you have selected 1,000 as your sample size, and you said you are informing that I have like I have taken this data in COVID time from 1,000 people. So this is not logical. You cannot collect data from 1,000 people, and that is a real data, like you are, and you have collected it physically. So that is not at all possible. So one is your population size. Second is the accessibility, how much that data is accessible to you, and is it actually possible to collect that data. Let's say I am saying that I have to collect data from users of FMCG products from my area. So that is quite possible. I can have everyone as my as a part of my study. I can collect data even from 500 people which are near to me and who are using FMCG products. So the population size of people who are using FMCG is quite a bigger one. So I can have a bigger sample size. Let's say if I'm saying I have to collect data uh, from people who are using, let's say, Apple television, and I'm collecting data from 500 people from a small district. So that is not possible. That is not possible because the population size is not so big. I can, even if it is big, I cannot have access to all the people who are using Apple televisions. So, and if I am using 500 as my sample size, I cannot justify that. Maybe by that formula it is coming. Maybe I have taken data of India, but that is not actually possible for me to go out at every place and to collect data. So that is not possible. So again, two things which you need to consider to justify your sample size is one, your population size, and make sure that you are taking population correctly. And the second is the accessible or reachability to that to, to those set of respondents whom you are considering as a part of your sample. Mr. Murthy, okay, you want me to explain dependent variable, independent variable, and the mediating variables. Again, that is being covered. I think the team can share you all those who want some explanations regarding the dependent variables, independent variables can have access to the last webinar. The team can share the link here. Support team can share that link here, wherein I have explained about the theoretical and the conceptual framework. You can go through that once, and still if you have any doubts, you can ask me. Nitin, standard deviation, again, this is a part of analysis. Once we collect quantitative data and we start analyzing that data. So there we use standard deviation, which I'm going to cover in my next session, which is on next Saturday. So we are going to talk about all the data analysis techniques, which all test we need to use once we have the data. So I'm going to cover this topic, Nitin, in my next session. Okay, so the team has already shared the link in the chat box. All of you who are asking about the variables part, independent variables, dependent variables, mediating variables, how you have to find out which variables you have to refer, can refer to this webinar. YouTube channel link is given here. Okay, so there's a question from Prashant. What about sampling error? Our sampling error will be more and our results will never be significant. Uh, this is a relating question. Okay, now sampling error is my next topic, Prashant. I'm just going to cover it after this. Sampling error and your sample size are two different things actually. How you are going to pick out those people who are going to be a part of your sample is a sampling process or a sampling technique, we can say. So how, let's say if there is any sampling error, obviously that will going to reflect your result. Now, there is no other way to correct it because you have to correct your respondent in that case. Let's say if you are collecting data from a wrong respondent, obviously you are going to get a wrong result. So two things are possible, either to change that respondent and you have to collect the information from the right respondent, or second case, which is a temporary option, which generally you should not go with that option. But if you have less time and you do not have any budget to go back to the respondents and ask for another set of questionnaires. So you can alter those responses. If you think that the questionnaire is not correctly filled, answers are not correct, so you can alter the answers on your own. But that is a tricky way and that is not suggestible. That can be only done if you are having a short time and you cannot collect data from more respondents. So that is just a trick which you can follow. But there is statistically, if I tell you how to correct this sampling error, it's just you need to like manipulate your data a little bit so that you can get the desired results. Okay, someone is asking about pilot study. So that is what I'm going to cover in this today's session only. I will cover about pilot study and how much respondents you have to consider for your pilot study. All right. So I hope all the questions which you have regarding the sample size are clear to you. If you still have any questions, you can write down in the chat box. Otherwise, I will move to the next topic. Okay, shall I move forward then? Just write yes in the chat box if you're clear till here and you want me to proceed to the next topic. One is not clear. Prashant, you're not clear. I think what is not clear, Prashant? You can ask your question again. You are asking larger the sample, more will be the confidence interval. If we don't collect more samples, we may get outliers in our study. Hence, our results can be insignificant. When you are talking about larger the sample or a bigger sample size, how much sample size you are considering? For me, the standard sample size, which is decent for you to collect data and which is decent for you to get the desired result, is between 100 to 200 or maximum 250. 100 to 200 people can be reachable. If physically not possible, you can collect data from online sources. So I am considering the standard one as 100 to 200. Okay. So you are saying if the population is 5,000, all right. I'm waiting for you to write some more details. If the population is 5,000 and if the population is 5,000 and what is your target population? Like which? Okay, so for sponsorship companies, I think again you can take data if you want to collect data from the employees of these companies, you can again target for 100 to 200. If you want to target the company's CEOs or maybe the top level employees of the companies, then obviously your sample size should be a lesser one. Employees at every level, then you can go for 100 to 200. You can go for that. 100 to 200 would be fine. If you want more, that is up to you. If you can collect data from more number of people, you can go for that as well. But if you are collecting more data, there are chances that it becomes a little difficult for you to manage a bigger data. All right. So now I proceed to the next topic. All right. So once you are done with the sample size calculation, now you know that from where you have to collect the data and how much sample size is required for your study. The next step is how, let's say you have finalized that 100 would be my sample size. So you now need to select those 100 people from the population. So how you will select those 100 people, or that process of selecting those people from the population is known as sampling. And there are two broad methods which are used, which is probability sampling and non-probability sampling. And I hope all of you must be knowing about these sampling techniques. So probability sampling is again divided into simple, random, cluster, systematic, and stratified. And non-probability is divided into convenience sampling, judgmental or purposive sampling, then snowball sampling and quota sampling. So basically out of these 8 sampling techniques, you need to find out that which of the sampling technique is going suitable, is going fine with your topic, and which method you want to adopt to select the respondents for your own research. So now again, which method you have to finalize or which you have to select depends on the topic and objectives. Let's say I was discussing about your researches, and if you are collecting data from employees, so how you are going to select the employees? Are you going to select all the employees of that organization, or maybe few of the employees, or any employee which is accessible to you? So that you need to decide, and basis on that you can select any sampling method which is suitable. Now this is again needs to be written when once you are writing your research methodology chapter. So there is a proper heading which is known as sampling details, and there you need to mention that which sampling process you have considered. So this is again one of the points which you can use in justifying your sample size. That how, let's say you have written as 385 as your sample size. Now, how you have collected data from those 385 and how you justified that sample. So you can mention one of the sampling technique as your point to justify the sample size. So these are just the simple definitions which I think all of you must be knowing about what is probability sampling and what is non-probability sampling. So just in one lines, I'm going to cover all these things. That whenever you're doing a conclusive research, which we covered in our last session, that what is conclusive research. So if your research is more of a conclusive nature, you can always go for a probability sampling, wherein you are just randomly selecting your population, your sample, your respondents. And if your research is more of an exploratory kind of a nature, then you can go for non-probability sampling. So this is one, again, a trick which you can follow. If study is conclusive, go for probability. If study is exploratory, go for non-probability sampling. Uh, these are the types of probability sampling which is available with us. So there is a simple random sampling, cluster sampling, systematic, and stratified random sampling. Now, I hope all of you must be knowing about these sampling techniques. But the most common one, people who are doing researches related to employees, related to customers, they can have a simple random sampling in their researches, wherein just you need to select any random person who is available, and you can include that in your sample. So this is a basic one, and this is most easiest one. You don't have to do anything. Anyone who is easily accessible, you can get the data collection done from them. Then cluster sampling. People who are doing researches which is based on some specific factors, maybe you are considering age as one of the factor, gender as one of the factors, location, or location specific studies. So therein you can go for a cluster sampling, wherein you are dividing your population in these sections which is based on, let's say, age or gender or location. So you can go for cluster sampling in that case. Third is the systematic sampling. So you have to select your respondent following a simple and a system which you can follow, which is like, if I talk in research terms, so systematic sampling is used very less. More of the researchers are using simple random or maybe stratified random sampling, and cluster sampling also sometimes, but I have seen very few research papers who have used a systematic sampling. Maybe that does not go by the topic. So this you need to decide that whether your research is going as per the systematic sampling or not. Then the fourth one is stratified random sampling, wherein you have to divide your entire population into small groups, but those groups should not overlap with each other. So that is one point of difference between cluster sampling and a stratified random sampling. So I hope this one is clear, and you really need to select your sampling technique here. The other one says the non-probability sampling, wherein we have again 4 types of sampling, which is convenience, judgmental, snowball, and quota. The most common ones here is again the convenience sampling. People who are conveniently available to you, uh, you can just have the data collected from them. So that is the convenience sampling. If you are having a very short time, or you are having a budget constraint, you do not want to spend more of your money on collecting data, and whatever respondent is easily available to you, you just want to collect data from them, then you can go for convenience sampling. The other one is snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is actually done wherein the topic of your research is little sensitive, and you cannot have access to the people, to the respondents very easily. So the other day I was talking to one of the scholar who was doing a research on child marriage. Okay, so victims of child marriage. Now, for a scholar, it is little difficult to get the data from those people who are actually a victims of child marriage, and even this is a sensitive topic. So you cannot openly talk about all the issues. So in that case, we would suggest you to go for snowball sampling. Whoever is possible, uh, like even 1 or 2 people are accessible, you can get the information from them, and then they will give you a idea of the bigger population. So snowball sampling is basically used in researches which are very sensitive, which is topics which are not openly discussed, and even the respondents are little difficult to trace. So there you can go for snowball. Judgmental or purposive sampling is where you actually know the purpose of your study. And let's say you have some set of questions. When we do research, we do have a set of questions, and if you think that the person can answer these questions, these basic questions, then he or she could be a part of your sample. Let's say if I wanted to uh, talk about some uh, uh, to some students with whom I wanted to discuss regarding how the education systems should be. So I want that at least the basic level of that scholar or that student should be a master's degree, or he should be a PhD. Then only I can be able to talk to them. So that is my judgment, that I want a person at least to be of this level. So there you can go for judgmental. Then the last one would be a quota sampling, wherein again you have a preset standards for your respondents. If your respondent crosses that or passes that standards, then you can uh, allow them to be a part of your sample size. So this sampling techniques are a basic one. You do not have to justify this. You just need to mention this, because most of the scholars, even most of you, also know about these techniques. But the problem is, the challenge is, when once you start writing your research methodology chapter, or once you talk about research methodology, you generally skip out these points. But this is even important, and this is equally required to be incorporated in your research methodology chapter. So once you have selected your sample size, after that you also need to mention about your sampling technique. So one of you have asked how to justify. So this could be used as one of the point to justify your sample size. Correct? So let's move ahead. I hope this is clear, and there are no much questions here. Okay, let me just check the chat box once. Okay, so there's a question from Nitin Kumar Gautam. Do you want me, like any one of you wants me to explain these probability and non-probability techniques in detail? If you want, I can explain. I thought that maybe you are aware of these terms. If you want, I can explain. Just write yes in case you want me to repeat all the techniques again. All right. Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, Akshita. All right. So I'll proceed to the next topic. So now, once you are done with your sample size, once you know which sampling technique you have to use, and you also know that which type of a study you have to conduct. So the next step is to prepare a questionnaire, which itself is a separate work, and many of these scholars face difficulty while developing the questionnaires, and even they stuck up in selecting that which questionnaire is best suited for their researches. So again, the trick is, if you have pre-decided that you are going to conduct a qualitative research or a quantitative research, which I have told you at which stage you need to decide. So if you are clear that I wanted to do a quantitative research or a qualitative research, you would not take much of the time while designing the questionnaire, right? So if you know that you are doing a quantitative research, obviously we need to develop a quantitative questionnaire, and if we are doing, let's say, a qualitative research, so we have to develop a qualitative questionnaire. Or if it is a mix, so we can develop a mixed questionnaire as well. So basically, we have two types of questionnaires. One is the qualitative questionnaire, which is also known as open-ended questionnaire, and it is also called interview questionnaire. So why open-ended? Because once we are developing a qualitative questionnaire, we are just writing the questions, and we are expecting our respondents to write their answers. The other one is quantitative questionnaire, which is also called as close-ended questionnaire or a survey questionnaire. Okay, so all of you must be knowing what is qualitative questionnaire and what is quantitative questionnaire. So I will just show you one this format or a glimpse of a qualitative questionnaire, how it looks. So you can see only the questions are there, and that is why it is called as interview questions. So while you are taking an interview of a person, you should have your questions in front of you, and you can ask your respondent these questions. Like one of you have said that you are doing a interview and that needs to be recorded. So you just ask questions and keep your recording on, and whatever the responses your respondent is giving, you just can record that. So this is how a qualitative questionnaire looks, and this is simple to create. There is no much of the things that you need to consider while developing a qualitative questionnaire. It's just that if you have your research objectives, you have to build your objectives in form of a question. That is what is required, and it's very simple to formulate as well. So you have your objectives, just take your objectives and frame a question. That's it. That's what is required. And I suggest you to keep a questionnaire shorter, because if you have around 30 questions, 40 questions in a qualitative questionnaire, so your respondent will not be much interested in giving you the responses. So always keep your questionnaires short, precise, and to the point. Whatever your objective is, your questionnaire should be to the point and perfectly as per your objectives. So this is all about qualitative questionnaire. The next is the quantitative questionnaire. So if you remember, we are Taking one example in our last session, I'll just open that slide just so that you can go through that once again. Okay, so I'm sharing the screen for that slide. All of you can see the screen? Okay, so if you remember, we have taken this example in our last session, wherein we are talking about the influence of customer-based brand equity on buying behavior, which is a study with special reference to convenience goods in Kerala market. And these are the research questions. Then we also have the research objectives, and we have framed the hypothesis as well as the conceptual framework. So the main point to consider here is once you start developing your quantitative questionnaire, as I said, for qualitative, it's very simple. You don't have anything. You can still create your qualitative questionnaire. You just need the objectives, and you are good to start with the qualitative questionnaire. But the things are little different for quantitative questionnaire. So once you develop, you wanted to design a quantitative questionnaire, you require a research objective, you require a hypothesis, and you require a conceptual framework. If you don't have any of the details, let's say you don't have hypothesis, you don't have conceptual framework, and it is not required in your study, then that is fine. You can start with objectives. But if you think that hypotheses are possible in your research, conceptual framework is possible in your research, so before starting with questionnaire, it is mandatory to have a hypothesis and a conceptual framework. Lot of scholars come up with the conceptual framework, come up with the hypothesis once the questionnaire is developed. But obviously that is going to create a problem, because then in that case your questionnaire, your hypothesis, and your conceptual framework will not be in sync. And what is required is the synchronization. All the hypothesis, conceptual framework, and questionnaire should be related to each other, right? So the process says that you should have your objectives, then you should have a hypothesis, and then the conceptual framework is required. Now, I am taking this conceptual framework as a base to develop my questionnaire. Okay, so I am again going back to the screen wherein I'll tell you how to develop a questionnaire. Okay, back on this screen. Now you can see I have taken 4 variables in my independent variable, and 3 variables are there as a dependent variable. So can you see brand awareness, perceived quality, brand association, and brand loyalty? These 4 are my independent variables. Then I have 3 dependent variable as price premium, brand preference, and purchase intention. So this is basically a guide, a base for developing a questionnaire. Now, what will I do is, once I start developing a questionnaire, first of all, everyone knows that we have to include some demographic information to get the details of the respondents. So I have included gender, then the district, nature of place, age, level of education, then household income, which of the following best represents your marital status, then your occupation. So few basic details, basic demographic details I have taken. You can, depending upon your research, you can add some more information, or you can delete some information if you think that is not required in your study. You can delete some of the options, but I have considered, because my topic is like that, so I have to consider all the information. Okay, once your demographic information is completed, then the second section talks about the convenience good. If you remember, my topic is regarding the convenience good. So I just wanted to check that which of the convenience good my respondent is consuming, is already using. So I have incorporated one question on convenience good, wherein I am asking about I have named few convenience goods, and I have mention the brand names as well. So two things I can get from here. I can get to know that which of the convenience good people are actually using and for which brand they are using, right? So the purpose of putting this convenience good question is to know about their brand preference for specific goods. And that is one of my requirement of my question of my topic as well. So section 1 and 2 is very simple, very basic demographic questions and some questions regarding the convenience good. Again, this section is, I think, not required in every research. It depends. But demographic section is required in every quantitative questionnaire. It's your choice. You put 2 questions or 4 questions, or I think 2 or 4 are required, but not more than that if you think that no demographic information is required. But still, it is important. Now, the third section of my questionnaire talks about brand equity. Now, if I go back to my conceptual framework, all these 4 variables are related to brand equity, right? So my third section would be on brand equity, wherein I have 4 variables: the brand awareness, perceived quality, brand loyalty, and brand association. Now you see how I have related that in my questionnaire. You will see the third section is on brand equity, wherein I have considered the first variable as brand awareness, and I have used a Likert scale here, wherein I am writing statements which is related to brand awareness. If you read the statements, all the statements are related to brand awareness. Okay, so I have written 5 statements here, and I have used a Likert scale. Then the second variable is brand association. Similarly, I have written few statements which is related to brand association. Then third is the perceived quality, and fourth is the brand loyalty, right? All the 4 variables which I have taken in my independent variable for brand equity, I have covered here in my questionnaire, right? Brand loyalty, perceived quality, brand association, and brand awareness. All 4 variables are covered, and I have written specific statements which is related to that variable in this table on a Likert scale. Fine. Now I will go to the next part of my conceptual framework, which was talking about the consumer behavior. Now, again, I will go back and I'll show you what are the 3 things, 3 variables I have. Now, this is related to consumer behavior, and I have 3: price premium, brand preference, and purchase intention. So again, if we see this part, so we have price to price premium. Then we have 3 statements related to brand preference and 2 statements which is related to purchase intention. Right? All my variables which I have covered in that are incorporated here. All the 4 variables of that brand equity and 3 variables of consumer behavior are included. Correct? So now if I have all the variables in my questionnaire, I would be able to analyze that conceptual framework well. And this is, I have used that conceptual framework as a guide, as a, a base for developing my questionnaire. Clear? This is clear. If you have any questions at this point, you can ask me regarding your questionnaire. Then I have last topic to cover. I will cover that. Any question here? How you have to develop a question quantitative questionnaire? Okay, shall I move forward? Okay, there is a question. Options of answer to start with essay or ST. Acha, okay. Whenever you are developing a Likert scale questionnaire, in the table, it is up to you. You want to start with strongly agree or strongly disagree. It's just when you are coding that, your strongly disagree is better if you do if you start with strongly disagree one. Like one should be your strongly disagree and five should be your strongly agree. It's regarding the coding part. Once you put the data in your SPSS, how you are coding that. So you can code as one strongly disagree, five as strongly agree. Clear? Okay, this is clear to all of you regarding questionnaire. And the third part, which I have not mentioned here, that is a mixed questionnaire. So that is up to you. If you want to have a mixed questionnaire, you can have a Likert scale, you can have demographic, and you can have few questions from open-ended questionnaire as well, like 3 or 4 questions which are open-ended. So that becomes your mixed questionnaire. All right. So the next topic which we need to cover is regarding the pilot testing and how you have to check the reliability and validity of a questionnaire. So now once you have started developing the questionnaire and it's completed and you also started collecting the data, so you have to check that whether the responses which you are getting are actually reliable or not. So to check that, we conduct a pilot testing. Pilot testing means on a small group of respondents, or you can say on a smaller sample size, we are getting the responses and we are checking that whether the responses are correct or not, or whether you are going to achieve your objectives from that answers or not. So once before actually conducting a study on a bigger sample size, we usually conduct on a smaller sample size first, and that study which is conducted on a small sample size is pilot testing. Okay. Now, uh, one of you have asked me question that how you have to select a sample size for a pilot testing. So whatever the sample size you have taken for your entire study, let's say 100 is the sample size. So you can have, sorry. Yeah, so if you are selecting a sample size for your pilot study. So whatever you are taking as a complete sample size, let's say for an example, 100 is the sample size for your complete research. So at least 20% or 30% of the actual sample size should be a sample for your pilot study. Okay, so if 100 is the sample size, you can have 20 for your pilot testing. You can take data from 20 people for your pilot testing. So 20% to 30% is required for a pilot testing. Clear? Now, this is all about pilot testing. Now, once you have the data, how you can check the reliability of a questionnaire. So, once you collect all the data, it is required to be updated in an Excel sheet. And there is an test in SPSS, which is called Cronbach Alpha. So generally, to check the reliability of a quantitative questionnaire, we use this test. And to check the reliability of a qualitative questionnaire, there is no such test. So just because you are interviewing the person, you know that the responses are going in a correct direction or not. So that is just a manual check which you can do, but there is no specific test for checking the reliability of a qualitative questionnaire. For quantitative, you can use Cronbach Alpha. Now, I am going to show you how you have to run Cronbach Alpha test in SPSS. If you have SPSS with you, or most of the universities are also giving you access to use SPSS, so you can do it on your own. It is very simple. So I'm just switching my screen to SPSS now. I'm just closing this PPT. Before that, I will show you one questionnaire on which I'm going to check the reliability. I hope you can see my Word document. I hope this is visible. Yes, 20 to 30% is required for pilot testing. Otherwise, SPSS won't give you result. Okay. So now this is the questionnaire on which I'm going to run a reliability check. You can see there are few demographic questions. So one point, you cannot check reliability of a demographic information. You can only check the reliability using Cronbach Alpha for Likert scale questions. So I have my Likert scale questions, which is starting from part B. And these are the questions. Like part B is having 5 questions on which I have to check the reliability. Then part C is there, part D is there, part E is there, part F is there, right? So I'll show you the SPSS window now. Can you see this? Now I have this data which is uploaded on SPSS. So this is my data. This is my complete data. All the parts, all the sections are uploaded here. And this is a variable view of this data. Now I have to check the reliability of all the Likert scale questions. So if you see my Likert scale questions starts from here. B1, B2, you see that I have part B and that have 5 questions, 5 statements. So this is my part B and this is having this 5 statement. Now I have to check reliability. Now how you have to do is you just go to analyze. If you have the SPSS with you right now, you can open that, and if you have the data inserted already. If you don't have that, you can just write down the points here, how you have to do, and maybe if you have access in your university, you just go and run the reliability. At least people who are very new to the SPSS, who do not know how to run the software, this is very simple. It's just a 2 or 3 step job, and you can do it on your own. Okay, you don't need to take help from anyone, at least for checking the reliability. This is very simple. So if you don't have, you can just note down the steps and then you can do. So first step is you have to upload all the data in your SPSS software. So I have already uploaded the data. Next is I'm going on a variable view and I'm going on analyze. Then there is an option called scale. So I'm opting for a reliability analysis, right? Uh, Once I click on the reliability analysis, this box is coming. Now I have to select then on which of the items or on which of the questions I have to run the reliability. So first of all, I want to run on that part B of my questionnaire. So I'm selecting the question from here. I'm just scrolling it down. So you can see I have selected here part B1 to B5 and all it's uploaded here B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, right? 5 items were there in part B, which I have coded as B1, B2, B3, B4 and B5. So it's there. I will click on statistics and I want correlation and scale if item deleted. Sometimes this is by default. If it is not selected, you can select correlation and scale if item deleted, and I'll just click on continue. Okay, I'm getting the output wherein this is my table where I have to check the reliability of my questionnaire, which is coming as if you see this value, this is Cronbach alpha 0.799. And number of items which I have taken here is 5. So I have considered 5 items when I was checking the reliability. So I've considered only 5 items, so that is why number is showing here. And the reliability for this is 0.799. Now, if you go by the theory of Cronbach alpha, it says that if the value of reliability or Cronbach alpha is more than 0.5, that means your data is reliable. But sometimes many scholars or many professors want the data to be reliable more than 0.7 or zero point 0.8. So you can check the reliability, the value as per your guidelines or whatever your professor suggests you. So accordingly, you can do that. If it is more than 0.799, I think this is uh, acceptable to me. All of you can see the screen, the result section. Okay. I think this is a different window. Let me just share it. Just a minute. Okay, can you see this now? Can you see the result screen now? All right. All right. So we have run the reliability test. We have run that Cronbach alpha, and this is how I received the result. Now, the main table which I have to see here is this reliability statistics table, wherein the Cronbach alpha value is 0.79. You can see here, this is 0.79, and it is showing the number of items, like n of number of items which I have considered to get this value is 5. because I have considered B1, B2, B3, B4, B5. So I have considered 5 values. So the reliability of those 5 items is 0.799. And if you want to see the reliability, individual reliability of each of the section, that also you can say, see in item total statistics table, this one. So this also you can see if you want to see, check the individual question reliability, and if you want to check a overall reliability of all the 5 questions, then you can check here. Now the next step is, let's say for my case, it is eventually coming 0.799, which is acceptable. So if in case you find the value is not acceptable or below 0.5, so you need to change your questionnaire or you need to change your data. Two things are possible. You need to change that questionnaire or you need to change the data. Fine. So if we go by the rules, obviously it says that if the questionnaire is not reliable, you need to change the questionnaire. But because in actual scenario, when people have already spent a lot of time on getting that data and it's actually not possible to change the questionnaire. So the trick says that you can alter your responses a little bit so that you can get the desired value. Fine. So this way you can check the reliability for all of your questionnaire, all the questions. And this is very simple. You can, if you, like one of you have mentioned, if you have not used SPSS before, you just simply download it. And if you have university access, you can use it and you can do it. This is clear. If you have any questions, you can ask me. We are done with the today's topic. The next part is obviously I will explain you how you have to analyze the complete questionnaire and how which test you have to apply in SPSS and how you, if you are collecting a qualitative data, how you have to analyze that. Right. So generally for analyzing the qualitative questionnaire, we are using a manual thematic analysis. So I will I will tell you how you have to do manual thematic analysis. And if you're using a quantitative questionnaire, then the most common software is again SPSS. So I will tell you how to do analysis using a SPSS software, at least the basic one. If we are having, if you have to use some advanced test, that also we can discuss, but I will start with the basic one so that everyone can understand that. If you still have any questions, you can ask me on chat box and then we will wind up the session. So I'm coming on the chat box now. Which version of SPSS should we select? You can select any version. I am using 22, version 22 as of now. So it allows me to give, to have access to almost all the tests. So I never felt that I should have an updated version. So it is fine. Whatever version you are using, that is fine. Tanvi, I can cover that, how to clean data before starting the analysis. I can cover that in my next session. SAV and the SAP files, basically, these are the input and the output files of SPSS. So if you see, I have inserted data in one of the file before. So that was my input file, and once I run the test, suddenly the next file will open. That is why you were not able to see the next screen. So the next screen, the next file was opening at that time. So that becomes your output file. So one is the input file, one is the output file. I can explain SPSS versus a MOS. Okay. Generally, when we are using a MOS, we use a MOS to test this conceptual framework. So I will try to cover that, but if you require, I can share these screenshots and how you have to do analysis in a MOS as well. All right, I will cover that. Nitin, it is not compulsory to do the pilot study, but if you are looking to conduct a good and a quality research, which is having all these steps done, then I would suggest you to go for pilot study, and uh, like this makes your study more good. Basically, this is the point. If you have any sort of confusions or doubts regarding your data, this helps. Otherwise, if you are skipping this step of doing a pilot study, I recommend you to check at least the reliability once you are doing the actual analysis. So that is what is required, because if your data is not reliable, you will not get the results. So first thing is to have your data reliable. Cronbach test is a test name. It's a test. So I don't know I actually don't know the meaning of that test, but it's a test which is used to check the reliability of your questionnaire. Yes, if the sample size is 270 and the sample taken for pilot study is 50, will it be okay? Yes, that will be okay. All right. Support team can write the email ID on chat box once. People who wanted to discuss one-to-one regarding their researches, regarding any of the point, if you want to have a consultation on one-on-one basis, you can write to us on the mentioned email ID, and we will help you. All right. Any other questions regarding the topics which we covered till now? All right, then. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining in the session. Thanks for your patience. And we will join back in the next session. That will be the last session of this series. And I hope to see you all in that session again. Thank you very much.